Hey, how you doing? It's JL again. I am back with you for another podcast episode, and today I want to talk to you about a thought that was sparked off of a Bible reading that I did, um, and it is from Second Corinthians. I'll read the verse first, and then I'll share the thought and a couple of applications, a few application points that might help you, and hopefully enhance your relationships, get you to think through things a little bit differently. So here it is, the two verses that sparked these thoughts. It's Second Corinthians chapter 5. I'm reading from the English Standard Version, and Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 16 and 17 says, "From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh, even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." We regard no one according to the flesh or the old self. Let me just see if I can find a New Living Translation, which might word this a little bit differently and might emphasize things a little bit different. So we have stopped evaluating others from a human point of view. At one time, we thought of Christ merely from a human point of view. How differently we know him now. This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old has gone, a new life has come. Cool. So the only the thing that comes to mind as I kind of think through those two verses, is that there is a forward movement that is happening. We know the Christian theological word for it is sanctification. There's a movement that happens within us for our transformation and growth, within which we experience a removing of the old stuff and living behind the old and becoming more and more like Jesus. So that's a process. It takes time. It takes walking with God, and intentional effort, obviously, on our part to be positioned to toward Christ. And so here's a thought: learn to press update on relationships with people. Learn to press update on relationships with people. If you think about your friends and family the same way that you've thought about them for the past 5 years, there are possibly things, and there's a possibly something you might be missing because your perspective is colored by an old version of themselves. We are all always in the process of growing and changing. In the process of changing, sometimes not necessarily growth, because not all change equals growth, but learn to press update. The analogy that I have, obviously, you've probably come across some level of technology which needed new software, which needed, maybe it's an application where they release and they update code, they update stuff about it to make it run smoother, also to protect it sometimes from certain insecurities that it might have. And so the same process happens as we are changing and being transformed into the image of Christ. And what that means is that there are certain things, there are certain parts of us that get left behind that will no longer be part of who we are becoming in Christ as we walk with him. So learn to press update in the relationships that you have with people. Stay curious, ask the questions, because we shouldn't look at anybody according to the old selves. Actually, we should have an expectation that there is something that might have changed about somebody. Maybe it's a hobby. It might be a small thing as a hobby, but that still informs how you view a person, whether it's their true self that we're seeing or it's an image of them that we want to see, so that it fulfills some kind of thing inside of us, whatever that is. So what are the things that you can consider as you are looking to press update? This might spark off a few other thoughts that you have, and so go with those. And it might be some stuff that you might need to talk to your friends and family about and discuss it further. You might need to help people update, press update about who you are, about what you no longer do, not how you no longer think, and what direction you're heading into. So here's number one. I possibly just chipped my tooth there. Assume that you've got something to learn. We're all disciple. A disciple is a learner. And so learning really needs to become part of our mentality in our worldview. Assume that you've got something to learn in most, if not all, scenarios that you are part of. Maybe there's the people that go to the extreme of they're going to learn from every single thing that they're part of. I don't think that's good for your brain. I don't know if the brain can actually handle that level of being so aware. But I assume do you have something to learn at least every day? One thing that you do have something to learn. And that creates in you the attitude of being a student of life, a student of things that are happening around you, so that you are not just living your life by the version of reality that is so long ago. You are out of touch with the words, with the pronunciation, with the assumptions that are happening in the now. I know that for parents, one of the things that's created quite a lot of tension is the fact that now kids prefer Google, prefer their friendships and friends and social media as a point of reference and a point of to go to for influence, etc. In terms of influence levels, parents have dropped down. I think they were 102, they were number 102 for a long time, and then just dropped down after Google, after social media, after friendship circles, etc. So that means that parents have a lot of hard work to stay up to date with the lingo, with the way and the framework and the mentality that their kids are working with, so that there is a level of there's a level of them still being able to guide, still being able to understand it when their child says something to them. So perhaps in our friendship circles and relationships and interactions, there might be some things that we are miscommunicating on, not understanding each other because we are talking from two completely different worldviews. So assume there are certain things that you have to learn about the other person, about the way they're thinking, and then hit refresh. Assume you've got something to learn, and then hit refresh. A refresh button generally, if you're working with software, if you've got a web page, you refresh. I sometimes will update web pages through, like on the back end, I might update some information and I want to see what it looks like. So I will update the information on the back end where all the data has to go through. And then I'll go to the actual website page as you would see it if you were just visiting it. And if it still has the old information on there, I will hit refresh so that it shows me the new information. So hit refresh. Hit refresh with the versions of people. So you don't just assume you've got something to learn. When there's something to learn that presents itself to you, they present it to you. Hit refresh so that becomes a permanent part of how you view, a permanent component of how you perceive the person, the relationship that you are part of. Another thing that you might want to think about is getting curious. Get curious. It's a rehash of the first thought, which is to assume that you've got something to learn, but getting curious is a little bit more proactive. Assuming you got something to learn, you're just kind of open, and if new information comes your way, then great. But getting curious is for those of you who need to learn how to perhaps start asking questions where you've made assumptions about people in your life and how they work and how they are, blah, 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 is maybe you need to relook at learning to ask those curiosity questions again. It's the things that you would ask a person to get to know them better, So if you would like any resources on that, let me know. Hit me up on my Instagram or whatever, however it is that you can find other. Just make sure that you subject it. I want to get curious about people that I even know now. There's a list of questionnaires that were researched and then done to help people to kind of stay in that curious mentality. And the last thing I think that might be helpful in updating the relationship that we have with people, which is another thought that will supplement all the other things that you probably are doing or are already thinking about, is championing the good in other people. One of the things about these verses that we that I specifically have emphasis on for me, it's what parts of Jesus do I see in other people that I want to encourage, that I want to look at, letting people know, hey, I see that. I really appreciate that. That is a reflection of God. And I love the fact that you are looking at reflecting God in the relationship in every aspect of your life. And it encourages me. And so as you encourage and champion the good and the godly in the other people, it also does help for them to actually be aware that, oh, actually, I do this thing that other people notices, they probably might not have noticed themselves. That will also help them to perhaps even think about, oh, maybe I should lean a little bit more into that. And us paying attention to another person also causes us to get curious. And because we have that focus on, we might just stumble on something else that we didn't know necessarily about. It might spark a conversation and lead to something else that we didn't necessarily know about, that might help fill in part of the gaps. Because all of this leads to having intentional, authentic, genuine relationships where it's not just shallow and I know you, I see you, and we are actually in a space where we're talking with a shared sense of common understanding that is up to date. And so that's just an encouragement. It's a thought that I've had from this, and some of the practicalities, I guess, that that may come up in the relationships that you have with people. For me, I think one of the things that I have been thinking about quite a lot on has been asking the real the curiosity questions, the questions like for example, you get to have dinner with one person in history. One person in the entire world, who would you choose and why? Because that will kind of give you, and this is not my idea, I got this idea for someone. So if you want that resource, make sure you ask me for that. But yeah, who would you have dinner with? Anybody in history. That will help you to actually, as you said, to look at how that person thinks, how that person is thinking, and more contributes to their thinking and their worldview. That's going to be the end of that, and I will see you in the next podcast.